LA Convention Center on the west coast of America. Live from E3, it's the GameSpy LiveWire. It is the IGN GameSpy LiveWire. We're adding IGN this year because, GameSpy added IGN. That's right. So, my name is David Lawrence. It's a Thursday. We're right pretty much midway through E3. We're finding ourselves wrapping up a day here coming up shortly. We still have some guests that we're waiting on. Next hour, a special Peter Molyneux is going to be here. And then we're going to have a wrap-up with some of the GameSpy editors, so we're really excited about that. Chat room wide open, ready for your enjoyment. Gaping chat room over at GameSpy Arcade and at IGN Insider area. If you're not yet a member, if you happen to be pirating the audio stream, we'd love for you to come to GameSpy Arcade, download the arcade, install it on your machine, and get legal, baby. Max Smart is with us from the Family Tech Show as well. He's my co-host while we're here at the E3 show. And joining us is Fargo. Hey, how was the show today? Did you get all your appointments in? Any big news?
Tremendous. Nothing big broke today.
No?
But, I took an opportunity to kind of cruise the show floor.
And yet, you will still, as a team, be able to generate thousands of articles for GameSpy and
I'd like to
IGN.
think millions of articles, judging by how sore my fingers are.
That's true. All right, so we'll take some questions coming up, but we want to welcome our guest. Everybody knows because it's been up on the schedule all day, but Will Wright is with us. Hey, Will, how's it going?
Hi, thanks for having me over here.
My pleasure. We had such fun with you last year. We really did, and you made your way out of the room that we locked you into, which was very nice.
You had fun at my expense.
That's right. No, we had you here last year. It was just, you are one of the people that has made gaming a humorous joy, a revolutionary humorous joy. I mean, being able to bring your sense of whimsy to gaming and the sim structure and everything, it's so enjoyable because of people like you.
So you're saying I can't be serious?
No, you can be serious. You can be deadly serious. I imagine I would not want to be across the negotiating table from you, but I don't know.
Yeah, you don't know.
You don't know. That's right. Okay. But here's what you can. The moment he sat down on the table, I had to keep him away from the computer, number one, because it's running the automation system, and people like him touch everything. They just touch everything. He started playing with my little fan. He picked up the thing. He was playing with the Krellming, whatever. And it's the nature. It's your nature.
You sound like my mother.
But it's true.
She also always complained because I take the vacuum cleaner apart, and I couldn't put it back together,
Here's the question. Did you design a better one because the suction was so bad?
No, but I took every last one apart that she bought.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And your house was filthy.
That's why she had to keep buying new ones.
It certainly sucked after he was done with it.
There you go. Ladies and gentlemen, the comedy styling of Fargo. Try the veal. Now, Will, what's happening this year with Sims and the rest of your projects?
Well, we're finishing up The Sims 2 for a September 16th release, and we're doing a new...
Will it ship on September 16th?
Come hell or high water, yes,
See?
it will.
Everybody's got this attitude. It will ship.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like everybody held
I'm sorry, I'm supposed to be the creative guy. It will ship when it's ready.
It will ship when it's ready.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Will it be ready on September 16th?
I forgot. I've been talking to marketing people so long today that I've kind of gotten that mindset. I need to kind of shift back.
When will it be ready?
I hope it'll be ready on September 16th, actually.
Yeah, good. Okay.
Yeah.
And what can we expect from it?
Well, basically, we've tried to take all the things that were good, cool about the original and keep those. We tried to keep the game very accessible. So rather than just pile feature upon feature and make it super complicated, we still want people who've never played a game before to be able to pick it up and roughly understand how to play it. At the same time, we've learned a lot, from the Sims and the expansion packs in terms of the things that players want to customize. And so it's far more customizable than the Sims 1 was. And the personalities go much deeper. But you don't really have to know that to play the game. It's very accessible to new players. And we're hoping that we can create at least as thriving a community around The Sims 2 as we had around The Sims 1, because I think that was really the thing that made the success of The Sims 1 was this huge, vibrant community making just tremendous amounts of custom content.
You talk about learning things. What have you learned from the truly society-changing Sims Online? I mean, when you can get coverage from the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, USA Today, London Times, London Observer. I mean, there's not a major newspaper in the world, major news organization in the world that hasn't discussed ad nauseam the changes in the way we look at gaming that have occurred since Sims Online.
Well, just whenever you get, a lot of people involved and build a community, whether it's an online game or an offline game, it's amazing how many aspects of reality, economics, sociology, group dynamics, reflect themselves in gaming,
Yeah.
So I think gaming, we're seeing a closer connection of gaming to our real lives and the real things that, we kind of interact with, our environment. social systems, our communities. A lot of that is moving into the game space now, which is kind of remarkable.
Well, I have been waiting all year to talk to you about this because in February I took a phone call from one of my listeners, a guy listener, who was breaking up with his girlfriend because she thought he was cheating with his sim girlfriend.
Oh, yes.
Now, it turns out he was.
Of course he was.
But it started online and moved offline.
Oh, the stories I could tell.
Yeah.
I mean, I keep in touch with a lot of the players and hear what's going on. And, in fact, that has happened many times, and people have, gotten married, that have met in the game in real life, et cetera, et cetera. But I can't even begin to go into some of the stories.
Well, the kicker of the story is the girl that he was cheating with, the Sims girlfriend, actually contacted the real-life girlfriend and said, we have an affair going that's not just online. You should know this because I don't want to hurt you. So when you think about the way your game has affected people's lives, does it ever scare you?
Well, I mean, people, their lives can be deeply affected by somebody they meet at Starbucks. I mean, there's this whole world, and we kind of have behavior all over the place, and Starbucks does scare me, but for different reasons. But I think, the fact that games are becoming such an important part of our lives, that's a natural result of that,
Yeah.
Just the way, a really good book might change your life or change the way, you change your behavior, your outlook on things.
Sure. Although you can't usually cheat with any of the characters.
Well, in your mind, you certainly can.
Oh, that's true. Okay, there you go.
But
certainly with Sims Online, I mean, you have a lot of ways to interact with people. Gestures and just sort of a way to show how you're interacting with people more so than you ever could with any other sort of long distance medium.
Yeah. I mean, in some sense, it becomes kind of a shared fantasy where normally when you're playing a game, you're kind of living in this little fantasy world. And in most games, the real game is in your imagination. That's the game we're trying to build as game designers, not the one on the computer. The one on the computer is just there to build a more elaborate model in your head. In an online game, you're building a model.
Back up again. Repeat that because I think that's a very interesting point. You're simply using the pixels on the screen.
Yes.
To make people's living, breathing idea of what they're doing more vibrant.
Yes, the real game that we're designing, the real model and simulation I'm trying to build is in the imagination.
Yeah.
The computer is a compiler for that model. It's a tool to help build that model in the player's imagination.
So apparently your brain is not object-oriented if it's a compiler.
Well, actually, basically it's a dual processor system, okay?
Okay.
And there's certain things that the analog processor does very well, and other things that the digital processor does very well.
Yeah.
And as a game designer, you have to kind of figure out what things do I offload to which processor. So, like in The Sims, for instance, the way they talk, it's this gibberish, because it turns out that people are much better at imagining the real dialogue and imagining more interesting dialogue than had we written it all.
Sure.
So that was an example of us offloading that task to this processor.
Right.
And so, as a game designer, you have to kind of think in those terms. In an online game, we're running a game, an imaginary game that's actually a shared negotiation between players as to what the fantasy world is. Mm-hmm. And so it's almost like this environment where people can come together and negotiate a fantasy, but it's a shared fantasy between them.
Right. Go to the chat room. There has to be tons of questions in there for Will Wright.
Absolutely. So we're talking about some of the situations that can occur between people as they're playing as Sims. One guy wants to know if some of the more or less sexual content in the game is going to get any more explicit as the games move on. So with Sims 2, is it going to be any more racy when characters are interacting?
Well, it's a bit more graphic just because you're in really close and you get facial expressions and more detailed animation, but still, it's nothing that you wouldn't see on primetime television. Still they kind of go under the sheets, and you see them playing in bed, but we don't define what play means.
Yeah.
And who knows? But, I think the thing about The Sims is it's accessible to such a wide variety of people. We have 8 and 10-year-olds playing it, and we have grandparents playing it.
Right.
And frequently we have, grandparents playing it with their grandkids.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really neat that we can have different generations enjoying the same, kind of activity together, entertainment activity. And I think you see that from the best movies and some of the best books that appeal to adults and children. So, I think we could make a more mature-themed Sims thing, and we would just be cutting off, huge amounts of our market without really making the game that much better or more interesting.
But you could add a 0 to the price.
A 0, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You could add an extra 0, I imagine, if you really went with an adult version.
Yeah, but I mean, again, I think that
would harm the franchise.
That's part of the game that's better run in this processor.
Ah, I see.
And so we could put that more, in front of you on screen with pixels, but it's not nearly as interesting as what you would imagine in your head.
That's true. All right.
You sort of see the Sims kind of do their own thing, and then whatever you want them to be doing is what they're doing in your head.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll automatically decompress those pixels in your imagination far more effectively than we ever could.
All right.
What I'm doing under the sheets, I hope, is definitely different than what you're doing under the sheets.
Vice versa.
I'll leave before you start that discussion.
Okay,
so I had a question about Sims 2. I spent some time with it yesterday. It's looking tremendous. So in Sims 1, it was very open-ended. You pretty much kind of do whatever you want. You just sort of meet your Sims need. Now, I noticed in Sims 2 now they have wants. And you kind of get scored. You get points by having them fulfill their wants. I thought that was an interesting design decision to kind of give people that.
Right. You see the wants, which are based upon the ambition that you set up for the Sim. They might be, I have an ambition to have a family, or to have a lot of romance, or to be wealthy. Now, you can choose to address those wants or not. And when you address a want, it actually starts cascading into a branching tree of more elaborate wants. So you're actually, by picking which want you fulfill, you're actually kind of changing the way they think about life and changing their future desires. So you are still exploring a very open-ended system, but there is a more structured thing in there. And in fact, what we're trying to do is we're trying to make The Sims 2 something that is still accessible to the casual gamer, but at the same time has much deeper strategic tactical gameplay for the hardcore gamer. That's what we want to do, is bring more hardcore gamers back into The Sims without losing our base audience of casual players.
I've seen people describe you as someone on a mission to mimic the world, and I don't think that's true. I think you certainly have some interesting ways of exploring the world, but just as you said, I don't think you're trying to reproduce what goes on in real life on the screen so that an observer could participate. You're, again, trying to implement.
Well, I think what we do is a caricature of the real world. We always over-exaggerate. Even SimCity, if you look at the levels of crime and traffic, it's an extreme caricature of the way a city works. What I'm interested in is getting games to the point where when you play a game and you step away from it, that you're going to look at the environment around you, look at your life differently. Just a little bit.
That's exactly what happens. You go through a long-form session, and then you come away, and it's like, how when you knew that it was time to go back to school in September.
At the end of summer vacation?
Yeah. Everything changes at that point. All of a sudden, I've got responsibilities now. I've got to go get supplies now. I've got to be somewhere now. There's a schedule that goes beyond getting up late and eating and going back to bed. You know?
Think about days differently.
Exactly.
Days have a different meaning to you.
Right. And so, and then once you don't have to go to school anymore, you still get that same feeling for a while every September.
Right.
And so that same thing happens when you play your games.
Yeah.
You come away with the game with a whole new outlook on life, a whole new attitude, a whole new approach. Even if it's negative, you still come away with a different perspective.
Yeah, there's actually a pretty cool epiphany that a lot of Sims players have had. They're sitting there playing the game, and they have their Sim, and he's in front of his computer, and he's playing some game on his computer, and it's like 2 in the morning, and he's thinking, I got to get you to bed because you have to get up early. And then all of a sudden they kind of step back and they realize it's 2 in the morning. They're sitting in front of the computer playing a game. They need to get up early.
Yeah.
And that's when they realize that they're taking better care of their Sim than they are of themselves.
Yes.
And that's when a lot of the hardcore gamers stop playing the game. And it's an interesting epiphany, that you can kind of end up recreating your world without even realizing it,
Right. What was the first game you ever designed?
It was a game called Wright on Bungling Bay back in the early 80s on the Commodore 64, and it was kind of a stupid fly-around, shoot-'em-up with a helicopter thing.
Yeah.
And
then from there, how did you go to...
As I understand it, it was making the map for the game, because I played a lot of Bungling Bay on the 64. Right. Making the map for the game, which was one of the coolest parts, was kind of more fascinating for you than making the blow-up part.
Yeah, to make that game, I actually had to create the maps myself, and I had little roads and buildings, and I was having more fun actually designing the islands and the roads than I was flying around and blowing them up.
Sure.
And so after I finished that game, I took the editor that I'd used for creating those islands and started playing with it and starting to add a little bit of dynamics and simulation, and it eventually evolved into SimCity.
Gotcha.
So basically I kind of found that, creating something in that game was more fun than blowing it up. And that was kind of the early seeds for the Sim
you're
games.
A builder, not a destroyer.
Well, no, I go out and play Battlefield 42 a lot.
Cool.
So
right.
I love those games. I absolutely love those games.
Let's go back to the chat room.
So CTS Motto wants to know what sort of AI improvements that we're going to see in Sims 2.
Well, the AI is much deeper. The Sims have much more situational awareness. They understand the relationships in the game. They understand that they're married, or this is their kid or their sister. We have much more open-ended social situations that deploy in the game. But really, the hard part isn't so much building deeper AI. I mean, that's hard, but it's technology, and I can throw a lot of resources at technology and put really smart people on it. Any game is about half technology and about half psychology. And it's the psychology that's really the hard part. So the AI we can make more elaborate, but the tricky part is how do we make that more visible to the player? How do we make the player's model understand why this Sim just slapped that Sim? And that's usually where we have to really spend a lot of time working on it, because we can build far more elaborate characters right now that we can easily convey to a player.
Now, I noticed Sims have memory now, so I saw a Sim saw a traumatic event, and little keys appeared above his head showing that he can remember that event.
Yeah, and in fact, you can kind of give them a traumatic childhood, and it screws them up as an adult. They develop phobias, And that's kind of one of the cool things about the
flashbacks?
game, you know. So, in fact, there is a much more strategic element to the game where you have to be careful the way you play them as a child because it's going to have repercussions way into their life, you know, as opposed to what just happened 5 minutes ago.
Wow. So maybe it isn't so far-fetched that you're trying to model the real world. I mean, when you think about it, I'm fascinated with the way your brain works, and I'm wondering where you go from school, college, etc., to game designer. Was it along a path of art? Was it along a path of technology, or was it along a path of psychology and social studies?
It was more model building. You know, as a kid, I spent most of my childhood building these models, and originally they were like little plastic models of ships and tanks and stuff. Then that kind of got me actually into robotics. I started building models with gears that drove around. Then I got into building home-built robots, and I bought my first computer to connect to my robots I was building out of like military surplus scrap. And you
Not
know,
a
robots.
Hero 2000 kit from.
Oh, I still have my Hero Junior at home. Yeah, I have
Hero
a house full
Junior.
of robots. You know.
Wow.
So robots
Hero
is like my
Junior.
my biggest passion in life, pretty much. And robots are nothing but an aspect to model humans. You know, we take various humans' abilities and we try to model them. And when you build a robot, you know, it's when you build a robot that you start realizing how incredibly wonderful a human hand is. Only when you try to, you know, recreate it. And so robots are interesting in a number of ways. One of the more interesting ways, you know, reasons I'm fascinated by them, is that we come to a fundamental understanding of how difficult or how complex we are as people. So robots teach us more about ourselves than they do about technology.
Right.
Well, so what I got out of my Hero was more mechanical. How did you get from mechanical to philosophy or to psychology? I mean, isn't there a huge switch there between a mechanical and models?
Do you have some sort of advisory team that talks to you about things like childhood affecting adulthood and so on?
Well, I mean, we've had people that we've talked to that are experts in that field, but actually, honestly, it's easier for us to learn those fields than it is to educate an expert in those fields, you know, with the kind of constraints we're operating under.
Right.
And that's the part of the game design I really enjoy. I really love doing the research, and I'll go overboard on the research side. And so that's always been kind of the fun part, and so I don't want to give away the fun part there. But in terms of the technology to psychology, you know, it's pretty apparent as you look into robotics that the really hard part isn't in hardware, it's in software. We can build some pretty capable hardware that could probably go to my fridge and give me a beer, but we don't have the software intelligence to control it. So that kind of drove me to AI and simulations, because simulations are the underlying models of the world that you first have to build effective AI. It has to have a model of the way the world is, the same way you build a model in your head of the world when you make hypothetical decisions. So it kind of went from, you know, robots to AI to simulations and then into games, roughly.
All right, back to the chat room, and I'm going to
so
cool
a
his
really
head
interesting
down.
question from Sprobe says that we've seen
thank you.
online multiplayer The Sims with Sims Online. Is there any plan to take Sim City online and have players be able to slip into different roles in, say, city government or throughout the city?
We have no plans. I mean, that's one of those things that we've played with over the years. In fact, we had a network of edition of SimCity many years ago that players could do that over a network, over a LAN. So it's one of those things, you know, I think the online marketplace is a challenge in a number of ways. You know, one of the biggest ones is the business model. It's very hard, especially to get casual players to spend $10, you know, a month to subscribe to a game. And so I'm still kind of waiting, I think, for the online space to evolve a little bit more.
Did you find that a challenge when you came out with Sim Online? Was it
Oh,
not
yeah.
a moneymaker for you?
Definitely. I mean, it's still running, and we're still improving it, and we're learning a lot from it every month, and we're still, you know, updating it and upgrading it every month. And much like the Sims expansion packs became, you know, a learning process for us. You know, when we did the Sims 1 and we did the expansion packs, in some sense what that was is it was the players teaching us what they wanted in the Sims 2. We got a sense of what worked well in expansion packs, what didn't work well. We were able to be more experimental in those expansion packs, and that deeply influenced the design decisions we, you know, made for Sims 2. Same thing with the Sims Online. We're looking every month at what they're doing. I play the game 2 or 3 times a week, still observing the social, you know, things that are going on in the game, the features the players like and dislike, and getting a sense of where I see that environment going. So I'd say that, you know, kind of over broad timescales of many years, there's a lot of like corporate learning going on, and we view a lot of these things as kind of learning experiences.
We're talking with Will Wright, who, by the way, has a business card where the name is blacked out. You see that up there? His name is actually blacked out. Darn those email addresses that help you figure it out. But tell the story as to why you blacked this out on your business card.
Oh, it's kind of one of my recent obsessions has been the Soviet space program, and the mastermind behind the Soviet space program was this guy named Sergei Korolev. And except when he was alive during the 60s building all these rockets, they never released his name. His identity was top secret because they were afraid the CIA would come and assassinate him.
Yeah.
So all they referred to him was as chief designer. And they always said the chief designer did this or decided that. And I always thought that was like the coolest title. So I had these business cards kind of in his honor. And after he died, they released his name. And this is basically to protect me from the Ubisoft assassins or whatever. They're going to come after me.
So after you unfortunately pass away, will this dissolve?
Yeah, well, in fact,
you can actually then read it?
Later tonight it will dissolve. It will catch on fire. Put it in a safe spot like an ashtray.
Gotcha, okay. More questions in the chat.
George730 wants to know if there are any new Sims expansions planned for Sims 2 already. We've seen a lot for The Sims. Have you guys started thinking along that track for Sims 2?
Oh, we've thought about the structure of how we're going to do it. And so what's going to happen is after The Sims 2 ships, a certain percentage of the team is going to be basically calved off to become the expansion pack team. We might even build 2 expansion pack teams. And it's going to be up to those teams to decide what ideas to pursue. That's going to be an internal decision to the teams. But right now, all those people are working on The Sims 2. We have a lot of ideas up on a whiteboard, things we might do, but we honestly have not decided yet.
Are you afraid at all of wrangling chaos? Because much of what you do is all about discovering what has not yet been discovered. And a lot of game designers sort of talk about a story path. They talk about, playing different games with different diversions, but it's always kind of like they have control over the overarching quality of the game.
Yeah.
And yet you sort of seem to welcome the fact that your games don't really have any sort of end game to them.
Yeah.
It's all about the discovery of what is not known yet. Is that hard?
It's probably because I really suck at telling stories. And I've never wanted to be a storyteller. I'd much rather that the players become the storytellers. And in fact, even back from that a step, I'm getting to the point where I'd rather the players become the game designers. I'd rather give them a really leveraged set of tools.
You're just a lazy bastard.
I am. I know how to be lazy,
Yeah.
One day I'll just kind of kick back in the game. Our players will do all the work for us, and we'll just rake it in, right?
Hey, that's the way the web works now.
Yeah.
Let your visitors create your content, and then you make money off of it.
Yeah, but I've always really enjoyed kind of doing creative, interesting things, constructive things, and I think what I would like to do is build more and more leveraged tools that the players can use to create their own situations. And to me that implies a much more open-ended experience that's much more interesting to explore than a fairly limited, kind of domain of things that the game designers put a fence around.
Mm-hmm. Back to the chat.
So Overmind wants to know how easy is it going to be to import user-created content into The Sims 2?
Actually, it's going to be hopefully quite a bit easier than The Sims 1. One of the things we have is that people can post collections of custom content like skins and things that will be available directly in-game. They will actually appear in the buy catalog. And so we're hoping that players that know nothing about the fan sites will actually be able to, use custom content because it's just popping up in the buy catalog of the game. And players can choose to publish it or not. We're going to probably have a website supporting all this. But that was kind of one of our chief things was how do we take this exchange that's going on between the really creative players making stuff and the casual players that want to collect it and make that even more kind of transparent and more, lower friction. And so now the really casual players don't even need to know about this stuff. They'll just, click on an icon and all of a sudden start seeing custom content in-game and start using it.
We're talking with Will Wright of Maxis, and I guess there are so many people that want to ask questions. I hope you can hang with us just for a little bit.
It's not up to me. It's up to my
Are we good?
PR
Are we
people.
good in terms of time?
Talk about wrangling
Yeah?
chaos.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah.
All you have to do when you ask that is just look for the nodding head.
Yeah.
Or look for the shaking head.
You see, when I'm at E3, I'm the sim.
You're
And
the sim?
I'm the sim. The marketing people have the little thing over my head.
Yeah.
And they click on me and go here, do that, talk
Yeah.
to this guy, go to the
Who are
bathroom
you?
now.
What's your name?
You get 10 minutes.
What is it? Desiree?
Yeah.
Desiree is your controller.
Desiree's the player.
There you go.
I'm the sim.
She's the play. Hey, don't hate the play. I hate the game.
Right.
Okay. All right. So let's go to the chat.
So Evil Englishman wants to know, do you think there is a way to make AI near human-like?
Well, humans are so plentiful. I'm not quite sure what the advantage of that is. You look at online games, and right now I can go in and interact with a person. I think the real issue again is kind of the bandwidth of what that interaction is. Even in online games, I feel like I'm interacting with somebody through a tiny drinking straw compared to sitting in front of them, talking to them in real life. Part of that is the conversational clumsiness, the body language, all this stuff. So even when there's a person on the other end, I feel like it's the interface that's the problem. How much can we convey, from one to the other? Again, I think we can build much more elaborate AIs than we're seeing in games, and that's not the hardest part. The hardest part is conveying that intelligence to the user.
But the testament to your skill is the fact that you can convey quite a bit in 16 by 16, 32 by 32, 64 by 64.
Oh, what amazes me are the old games. Back when I remember playing Choplifter, and these little guys came out, and they were no more than like 20 pixels.
Yeah.
They'd get out of my helicopter and wave to me, and I felt so good that I had saved 20 white pixels.
Yeah.
And so that was a good example of this computer kind of making up for limitations in that computer.
And you felt to yourself, those 20 white pixels will live to fly another day.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And they might have kids and a family, and
Sure.
I've maybe solved an entire family line.
And there it goes. There goes the
And
whole
they
thing.
probably evolved into the things that are now 100 pixels, and now, the meshes and everything.
Yep.
So, from one Battlefield 1942 player to another, Saris the Vampire wants to know, are there going to be any drivable vehicles in any of your games coming up?
Oh, gosh. The short answer is yes, but I can't say anything more than that.
Oh.
That's number 9. That's number 9, and that's kind of a quasi.
Well, you got a yes first.
That's not a no comment.
That's tantalizing.
That's a yes, but I can't really say how.
Yeah.
So I don't know that we can actually put. We've just been acquiring all the different ways that people go no comment.
Yeah.
All the way from, asking the Sony guys about, the addictive nature of their games and having them go
No comment?
no comment,
Very
Really?
sternly.
and bringing the whole room to a dead.
Cut to commercial.
That means they have a whole research division dedicated to that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well,
Yeah.
they were just told, if anybody says anything about it, no comment. On the other hand, there are people who are quite vociferous about it. They really want to say something about it, and they go, no comment.
Nod.
Yeah.
Know what I mean?
But at the same time, when people want to do things with your games, you seem to be open, obviously, because you, again, lazy bastard,
Yeah,
want
that's me.
to create the opportunity for your players to be more involved with the development of the game.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we've determined that's critical to our success. One of the things we did a few months ago is we had this thing called Sims 2 University. And we took the people that were running our biggest fan sites for the Sims 1, we had them all over to EA for 2 days. We flew them over and showed them the Sims 2, and we got their comments and got them very involved in the design process. And so, I think what we do now is we build games, but the more important thing that we're trying to do is we're trying to build really vibrant communities. The game is something that we want to build the community around.
Right.
But, if we can nail the community, we're going to have a franchise.
Yeah.
If we nail the game without the community, we're going to have a hit.
You bet.
So.
Will Wright, everybody. All the Sims. Give him a big round of applause.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much for being on. I appreciate it very much. Coming up next, Peter Molyneux.
That's right.
As we continue our exclusive feed to the chat for both GameSpy and IGN. It's LiveWire. I'm David Lawrence. Back in a moment.